The alarm screamed through the great halls of Nexus Prime Council. Speaker Vexthara's crystal body flickered with panic as she watched the display screens. Dark shapes moved between the stars, growing larger with each passing hour. The void. Swarm had returned. Captain Lee Daeho was drinking coffee on the bridge of his ship when the message came. The U's Indomitable floated near Titan, patrolling the outer edges of human space. Lee set down his cup and stared at the screen. The Galactic Council was asking for help from humans. "Sir, this has to be a mistake," said his second officer. Lieutenant Park So-jin. She was young, barely 30, with short black hair and smart eyes. "The Council has never asked us for anything except to stay away from their space." Lee read the message again. 3 simple words kept repeating, "Please help us." On Nexus Prime, Ambassador Kang Taemin stood before the council chambers. He was the only human in a room full of aliens. Most of them were twice his size. Some glowed with their own light. Others looked like living metal. All of them were afraid. "You must understand," High Admiral Quender was saying. His voice sounded like grinding stone. "Our weapons do nothing. Energy beams make them stronger. Our matter converters turn our own ships against us. We have lost 12 fleets in 3 days." Ambassador Kang had seen the reports. The void swarm consumed everything. Ships, stations, entire planets. They turned matter into more of themselves. They ate energy and grew bigger. The advanced races of the galaxy were helpless. "What about the Luminari?" Kang asked. "The energy beings were the most powerful race in the galaxy." "Gone." Speaker Vexthara's crystal form dimmed. "They tried to fight with pure energy." "The swarm absorbed them all. Every one of them is now part of the enemy." The chamber fell silent. Kang looked around at faces full of despair. These were the rulers of thousands of worlds. They had technology that could move stars and create life from nothing, but they were beaten. "Why are you asking us?" Kang said, "You have always called Earth a death world. You say humans are primitive savages." "Because," Quender's massive form leaned forward, "your primitive weapons might be our only hope. The swarm cannot adapt to simple kinetic force, bullets, explosives, chemical reactions. Things we stopped using 10,000 years ago?" Back on the Indomitable, Captain Lee gathered his crew. There were only 300 humans on the ship. They came from all over Earth. Dr. Park So-jin was from Seoul. Chief Engineer Nam Ji-hai was from Busan. Lieutenant Colonel Shin Oh-ri on the small marine unit. They were mechanics, soldiers, and scientists. Nothing special by galactic standards. Seoul. "Well, let me get this straight," Nam Ji-hai said. She was small but tough, with oil under her fingernails and steel in her voice. "The entire galaxy is being eaten by space monsters and they want us to fix it?" "That's about right," Lee said. "With what?" "Our ships run on chemical rockets, our guns fire metal bullets. We barely have energy shields." Shin Eri crossed her arms. She was tall and lean, with scars on her hands from combat training. "Maybe that's the point," Dr. Park said quietly. She was studying the data the council had sent. "Look at this. Every time they used energy weapons, the swarm got stronger. Every time they used advanced technology, it turned against them." Lee nodded. He had spent 20 years in the Earth fleet. He had fought pirates and rebels with good old-fashioned guns and missiles. "We fight the way humans have always fought, with what we have." The call went out across human space. Earth's tiny fleet began to move. 50 ships in total. The largest was barely a kilometer long. They carried no exotic weapons, no reality-bending technology. Just humans and their simple tools. On Mars, Captain Ominji climbed into her fighter. It was an ugly thing, built for atmosphere, flying but modified for space. It had no energy shields, no quantum computers, just armor plating, chemical rockets, and guns that fired depleted uranium rounds. "Control, this is Red Leader," she said into her radio. 36 fighters ready for launch." "Copy, Red Leader. Try not to embarrass us out there." Minji laughed. "No promises." The human fleet was laughable by galactic standards. Their ships moved slowly. Their weapons were crude. They had to actually aim their guns instead of letting computers do it. Most galactic races thought it was suicide, Ambassador. Kang watched from Nexus Prime as the human ships appeared on long-range sensors. They looked so small next to the alien dreadnoughts. So fragile, this is madness, one council member said. Those primitive ships will be destroyed in minutes. Maybe, Kang said. But we're the only ones who showed up. Captain Lee stood on his bridge as they approached the battle zone. Through the viewports he could see the void swarm. It looked like a living shadow, moving between the stars. Ships went in and never came out. Or worse, they came out changed, turned into weapons for the enemy. All ships, this is indomitable, Lee said into the comm. Remember what we're fighting for, not just Earth, every world. Every life in this galaxy. The responses came back from 50 human captains. They were scared, they were outgunned, they were probably going to die. But they were ready. Sir, Dr. Park said, incoming transmission from the Council fleet. Put it through. Hi, Admiral. Quender's voice filled the bridge. Human vessels, you should retreat. This enemy is beyond your capabilities. Lee looked at his crew. These people from the death world called Earth. They had trained in gravity that would crush most aliens. They had breathed air that would poison other species. They had learned to fight in conditions that would kill entire civilizations. Negative. Admiral, Lee said, we didn't come this far to run away. Then may whatever gods you worship have mercy on you, Lee smiled. We make our own mercy. The human fleet moved toward the darkness. Behind them, the lights of 1,000 worlds waited for salvation from the most unlikely source in the galaxy. The primitive Deathworlders were going to war. The alien observers could not believe what they were seeing. The human ships moved like ancient beasts through space, slow and clumsy. Their hulls were thick metal plates welded together. No energy shields protected them. No quantum computers guided their flight. They looked like museum pieces. This is embarrassing, muttered Captain Zalek of the Helix Confederation. His crystalline body sparkled with disgust. Those humans still use chemical propulsion. My people abandoned such crude methods 20,000 years ago. On the human flagship, Chief Engineer Nam Ji-hai was busy making those crude methods deadlier. She crawled through maintenance shafts, checking every bolt and wire by hand. Her team worked around her, modifying weapons that other species considered jokes. Boss, the railguns are ready, called Technician Lin Junsuk. He was covered in grease, his uniform torn from squeezing into tight spaces. We boosted the power by 30%. Good, what about the missile tubes? Loaded with iron core warheads. No fancy technology, just big chunks of metal that hit really hard. Nam Ji-hai nodded. She had been an engineer for 15 years. She understood something the aliens didn't. Simple machines were harder to break. And they were impossible to turn against you. Dr. Kim Sun-ho was having the same thoughts in his lab. He stared at the sample of void swarm material the Council had provided. Under his microscope, it writhed like it was alive. When he touched it with an energy probe, it absorbed the power and grew larger. When he hit it with a laser, it reflected. The beam back at him. Fascinating, he said to his assistant, Dr. Honda Jin. It's like the perfect defense against advanced technology. What happens if we try something simpler? Han asked. She was young but brilliant. Fresh from the Seoul Institute of Technology. Kim picked up a hammer from his workbench. It was just steel and wood made by human hands. He brought it down on the sample. The void swarm material splattered like regular organic matter. Well, he said, looking at the hammer, that worked. Word of the test spread through the human fleet. In the training bays, Commander Yoon Hyunwoo gathered his Marines. These were the toughest humans in space. They had trained in the mountains of Korea, the deserts of Africa, and the frozen wastes of Antarctica. They were ready for anything. Listen. Up, Yoon said. He was a big man with scars on his face and steel in his voice. The aliens think we're primitives because we still fight with bullets and bombs. Today, we're going to show them why Earth makes the best soldiers in the galaxy. The Marines checked their weapons. assault rifles that fired metal bullets, grenades filled with chemical explosives, combat knives forged from earth steel. No energy, weapons, no plasma guns, just tools that had served humanity for centuries. "Sir," asked Sergeant Park Dong-hyen, "what if their energy shields stop our bullets?" "Then we get close and use our knives," Yoon replied. "These things can't adapt to being stabbed." The aliens watching from their safe distance laughed at the human preparations. Captain Zelak sent reports back to his superiors. "The Deathworlders are arming themselves with metal projectiles and chemical explosives. Their tactics are 10,000 years out of date," but some aliens were not laughing. Ambassador Kang stood in the council chambers, watching the displays. He saw human technicians working with their hands instead of using robotic assistants. He saw soldiers training with weights and obstacles instead of virtual reality. He saw engineers solving problems with tools instead of computers. "They do everything the hard way," observed Speaker Vextara. "Yes," Kang said, "that's what makes them dangerous." The first test came when a Void Swarm scout found the human fleet. It was small, only the size of a frigate, but it had already consumed 2 alien research vessels. It moved like liquid shadow, changing shape as it approached. Captain Oh Min-ji was ready for it. Her fighter squadron launched from the carrier Sejong, 36 small craft that looked more like atmospheric planes than space fighters. They had no shields, no exotic weapons, just armor, engines, and guns. "Red Squadron, this is Red Leader," Min-ji said into her radio. "Target the scout ship. Remember, no computer targeting? Use your eyes and your instincts." The Void Swarm Scout tried its usual tricks. It fired beams of absorbed energy at the fighters. The beams passed harmlessly through space where computer-guided ships would have been, but the human pilots were flying manually, making random turns and rolls that no algorithm could predict. "Red 3, lining up for attack run," called Lieutenant Kim Tae-young. His fighter dove toward the scout, guns blazing. Depleted uranium rounds tore through the Void Swarm's hull like paper. The scout ship writhed and tried to adapt. But there was nothing to adapt to. The bullets were just dense metal moving very fast. The explosive rounds were just chemicals that burned hot. Simple physics that the universe had followed for billions of years. Min-ji led her squadron in a coordinated attack. They came from all directions, pouring metal death into the scout ship. It tried to convert their weapons, but bullets don't have complex systems to corrupt. It tried to absorb their energy, but chemical explosions don't emit the kind of power it could use. In 3 minutes, the scout ship was debris floating in space. The alien observers fell silent. Captain Zelak stared at his instruments, not believing what they told him. A Void Swarm vessel had been destroyed. Not absorbed, not converted, but completely destroyed. "Impossible," he whispered on the human flagship. Captain Lee smiled as the reports came in. "1 down," he said. "About 1 million to go." The news spread through the galaxy faster than light. The primitive humans had done what the most advanced civilizations could not. They had killed a Void Swarm vessel. In his lab, Dr. Kim Sun-ho was already working on the next problem. He studied pieces of the destroyed scout ship, looking for weaknesses. What he found made him excited and terrified at the same time. "Captain Lee, you need to see this," he said over the comm. Lee arrived at the lab with Dr. Park and Chief Engineer Nam. Kim pointed to his analysis screen. "The Void Swarm is incredibly advanced," he said. "It can manipulate matter at the quantum level. It can absorb and redirect any form of energy. It can corrupt and control complex computer systems." "But?" Lee asked. "But it evolved to fight enemies that rely on those things: energy weapons, exotic matter, quantum computers. It has no defense against simple kinetic force and basic chemistry." "No." Ji-hai grinned. "You mean it's defenseless against everything we use?" "Not defenseless," Kim warned. "But it can't adapt quickly enough. Every time we hit it with bullets or explosives, it has to physically rebuild itself. That takes time and energy." Dr. Park was studying the data. So if we hit them hard and fast, we can destroy them faster than they can adapt. Exactly. But we have to be careful. The moment we start using energy weapons or advanced technology, we lose our advantage. Captain Lee nodded. He understood. Humanity's weakness was their strength. Their primitive technology was their secret weapon. Across the fleet, human crews prepared for the real battle. They cleaned their guns with oil and rags. They checked their missiles with mechanical gauges. They sharpened their knives on whetstones. Everything the hard way. Everything the simple way, the way humans had always done things. The galaxy was about to learn why Earth was called a death world. Not because it was hard to live on, but because it created the kind of people who could bring death to their enemies, no matter how advanced those enemies might be. The main void swarm arrived like a tide of darkness. It stretched across 3 star systems, consuming everything in its path. Planets disappeared into its mass. Space stations were broken down and rebuilt as weapons. The sight of it filled the galaxy with terror. Admiral Ru Dongjin watched from the bridge of his flagship as the alien defense fleets tried to fight. The Helix Confederation sent their most powerful dreadnoughts. Energy beams that could crack planets bounced harmlessly off the swarm's surface. Worse, the energy was absorbed and used to make the swarm stronger. "Sir, the alien ships are falling back," reported his communications officer. "Their entire battle line is collapsing." Ru nodded. He was an old man, gray-haired and scarred from 30 years of military service. He had studied every human war in history. Now he would need all that knowledge. "Signal the fleet," he said. "Execute Plan Alpha. All ships, remember your training." The human fleet moved in a way the galaxy had not seen for millennia. Instead of charging forward in a straight line, they split into groups. Some ships went left, others right. A few fell back as if retreating. To alien observers, it looked like chaos. Captain Ominji led her fighter squadron in hit-and-run attacks. Her pilots flew in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully planned. They would dart in, fire their weapons, and disappear before the swarm could respond. "Red 2, this is Red Leader," she said into her radio. "Target the tendril near grid 77. Hit it with everything you have, then get out." "Lieutenant." Kim Tae-young rolled his fighter into a diving attack. His gun spat uranium rounds into the swarm mass. Where the bullets hit, pieces of the alien creature went dark and fell away like dead skin. "Confirmed hits, Red Leader." "The thing is definitely hurt," Minji smiled. "Good, remember, we're not trying to win a fair fight. We're trying to hurt them and survive." This was something humans understood that other species had forgotten. War was not about honor or showing superior technology. War was about making the enemy stop fighting, by any means necessary. On the ground, Master Sergeant Lim Jun-suk prepared for something no galactic military had attempted in thousands of years: a boarding action. His team of 20 Marines was going to attack a void swarm vessel from the inside. "Remember," he told his men as they checked their equipment, "these things adapt to energy weapons, but they can't adapt to being shot, stabbed, or blown up with good old-fashioned explosives." The Marines wore simple combat armor made of steel and ceramic. Their weapons were assault rifles, shotguns, and combat knives. They carried backpacks full of chemical explosives. To most aliens, they looked like barbarians. Private Choi Young-min was the youngest Marine on the team. He was scared, but trying not to show it. "Sergeant, what if their hull is too thick for our weapons?" Lim patted the demo charges strapped to his back. "Then we make our own doors." The boarding craft was basically a missile with people inside. It had no shields, no fancy guidance systems. Just thick armor, chemical rockets, and a pointed nose designed to punch through enemy hulls. The pilot, Lieutenant Park So-young, flew it like she was driving a truck. "Hang on, boys," she said. "This is going to hurt." The craft smashed into the void swarm vessel and punched deep into its hull. Alarm screamed as atmosphere rushed out of the hole. The Marines grabbed their weapons and followed Lim into the alien ship. Inside, the void swarm vessel was like a nightmare. The walls pulsed like living tissue. Strange lights flickered in the darkness. The air was thick and hard to breathe. "Stay together," Lim ordered. "Watch your corners." "These things are smart." The first swarm creature they met looked like a man, made of black metal and shadow. It reached out with claws that sparked with stolen energy. Private Choi opened fire with his shotgun. The creature's torso exploded in a spray of dark fluid. "Holy shit," Choi whispered. "It worked." "Language Marine," Lim said, but he was grinning. "Now let's go find their engine room." They fought their way through corridors that shifted and changed around them. The swarm tried to trap them with walls that moved like liquid. But the Marines had trained in caves and tunnels. Back on Earth, they knew how to navigate in the dark. More swarm creatures attacked. Some looked like spiders made of wire and shadow. Others were just masses of tentacles with teeth. All of them died to human bullets and human steel. "Sir," called Corporal Nam Hyanwu from up ahead, "I found something big." The chamber he had found was the size of a cathedral. In the center was a pulsing mass of organic machinery. Cables ran from it, too. Every part of the ship. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. "That's got to be their brain," Lim said. "Plant the charges." The Marines worked quickly, placing explosive devices around the organic computer. The swarm tried to stop them. Security drones flew down from the ceiling, firing beams of energy. But the Marines just shot them down with their rifles. "Charges set," reported Private Kim Dong-Hyan. 30 seconds to detonation." "Move out," Lim ordered. "Back to the entry point." They ran through corridors that were trying to close around them. The swarm knew what was coming. It threw everything it had at the Marines. But human determination and human weapons cut through. Every obstacle, they reached their boarding craft just as the charges went off. The explosion ripped through the swarm vessel like thunder. Lights went out, the pulsing walls went still. The ship began to break apart. "Go, go, go!" Lim shouted. Lieutenant Park fired the engines and pulled away from the dying alien ship. Through the viewports they watched as the void swarm vessel cracked open like an egg. Atmosphere and debris spilled out into space. "Boarding craft to fleet." "Command," Park reported. "Target destroyed." All Marines accounted for. The news spread through the human fleet like wildfire. They had done it. A void swarm hive ship was dead. Not converted, not absorbed, but completely destroyed. On alien ships across the battle zone, commanders stared at their instruments in disbelief. The humans had actually boarded an enemy vessel and destroyed it from within. It was insane. It was impossible. It was working. Admiral Ru watched as more human tactics proved effective. His ships used coordination and teamwork instead of relying on superior firepower. They shared information through radio instead of quantum networks the swarm could corrupt. They made plans and changed them based on what they saw, not what computers told them. Dr. Han the Jin was busy in her mobile laboratory, studying everything they learned from each battle. She had been a military historian before joining the fleet. Now she was applying lessons from Earth's bloodiest conflicts to space warfare. "Admiral," she reported, "the swarm is having trouble adapting to our tactics. They're designed to fight predictable enemies with standard battle formations. What do you recommend?" Ru asked. "More of the same. Hit and run. Divide and conquer. Make them fight the kind of war humans are good at." The tide of battle was turning. Void swarm vessels that had seemed invincible were falling to human guns and human courage. The galaxy began to hope for the first time since the invasion began, but the humans knew they were just getting started. The real enemy was still out there in the darkness between stars. And it was much, much bigger than anything they had faced so far. Captain Lee stood on his bridge, watching his people fight and die for worlds they had never seen. For aliens who had called them primitive. For a future that might not include Earth at all. "Sir," his communications officer called, "we're getting requests for help from 12 different systems. They all want human tactical advisors," Lee smiled grimly. "Tell them we'll do what we can, but they need to understand something." "What's that, sir? We fight to win, not to look good doing it." The swarm was learning. That was the problem General Beak So Young faced as she stood in the command center of the liberated world of Kepler 442b. Around her, alien refugees from a dozen species worked alongside human soldiers to rebuild their broken cities. "General," called Major SCO High 1, pointing at the tactical display, "the swarm is using debris from destroyed galactic ships to build armor. Physical barriers that our bullets can't punch through." Beak nodded. She was a small woman with iron gray hair and eyes that had seen too many battles. She had liberated 6 worlds in the last month, but each fight was getting harder. "They're adapting without changing their basic nature," she said. "Smart, show me the latest reports." The data was troubling. Void swarm vessels now protected their vital areas with thick plates of salvaged metal. They used the hulks of destroyed alien ships as shields. Some had even learned to create simple kinetic barriers, walls of debris that absorbed bullets and missile impacts, but humans were adapting too. Captain Zhang Wu Jin was building something that had not been seen in the galaxy for thousands of years. A fort, not an energy shield or a quantum field generator, but an actual fortress made of metal and stone. His engineering crews worked around the clock, welding plates together and pouring concrete foundations. "Sir?" asked Lieutenant Yoon Minji as she watched the construction. "Wouldn't it be easier to just set up a shield generator?" Zhang shook his head. He was a big man with hands scarred from years of actual construction work. "Shields can be corrupted or turned off, but you can't hack a concrete wall?" His engineers came from construction companies across Earth. They knew how to build with their hands, not just with machines. They welded joints that would hold under pressure. They mixed concrete that would stop projectiles. They dug trenches and bunkers that could shelter thousands of refugees. The aliens watched in amazement as the humans built their fort using techniques that were older than spaceflight. No robots, no energy tools. Just people with welding torches and cement mixers. "This is insane," muttered Captain Zelak, the Helix officer who had been assigned as a liaison. "My people could build a structure like this in hours using matter compilers. And the swarm would corrupt it in minutes," Zhang replied, not looking up from his blueprints. "This fort will stand because it's too simple to corrupt and too solid to break." The real breakthrough came from Dr. SCO High 1 in her mobile laboratory. She had been studying the swarm's quantum consciousness, the thing that held the entire species together across space and time. What she found changed everything. "General Beak," she said over the comm, "I need to speak with you immediately. It's about radiation." Beak found her in the lab, surrounded by instruments that looked ancient compared to galactic technology. Geiger counters, spectrometers, and computers that actually use silicon chips instead of quantum processors. "Tell me," Beak said. "The swarm's collective consciousness exists in quantum states," ACO explained, pointing to her readings. "Energy weapons actually strengthen these states, but certain types of radiation disrupt them completely." "What kind of radiation?" "The kind we get from nuclear fission? Old-fashioned atomic reactions. The swarm can absorb fusion energy and antimatter, but fission products poison their quantum fields." Beak stared at the data. Nuclear weapons. The galaxy had moved beyond them eons ago, considering them primitive and wasteful. But Earth still had them, thousands of them. "How much radiation would we need?" she asked. "Not much for individual ships, but for their main consciousness." SCO pulled up more calculations. "We would need to detonate nuclear devices at specific quantum resonance points. Create dead zones where they can't maintain coherence." Colonel Park Dong-hyen was already planning the mission before SCO finished explaining. He was a thin man, with quick eyes and a mind that understood explosives better than most people understood breathing. "Deep strike operations," he said, studying star charts. "Small teams with portable nukes. Hit their staging areas and supply lines. It's a suicide mission," Beak pointed out. "Maybe, but it's also the only way to stop them from bringing more ships from dark space." The first mission launched within hours. Park led a team of 12 specialists in a stealth ship that was basically a metal box with engines. No shields, no fancy sensors. Just enough speed to get in and enough armor to maybe survive the trip home. They targeted a swarm staging area in the Vega system. The place had been a resort world once. Now it was a writhing mass of organic machinery and converted alien ships. Perfect for a nuclear surprise. Remember, Park told his team as they prepared to drop, these are dirty bombs. We want radiation, not just explosion. Set the charges at the quantum resonance points Dr. Essil identified. Sergeant Kim Yoo-jin was carrying half the nuclear devices in a backpack that would have killed most aliens just from the radiation exposure. Humans from Earth were tough enough to handle it, at least for a few hours. Sir, she said, checking her dosimeter, we're already getting cooked just being near these things. Better us than the galaxy, Park replied. They landed in the ruins of what had been a beautiful city. Now it was covered in swarm biomass that pulsed with stolen energy. The air was thick with spores and strange chemicals. But humans could breathe almost anything compared to other species. The team moved through the corrupted landscape, placing nuclear devices at carefully calculated positions. The swarm knew they were there but couldn't understand what they were doing. Radiation was not something it had learned to fear. Charges placed, reported Corporal Lee Jin-ho from the Northern Quadrant. Timer set for 60 minutes. Similar reports came from the other team members. 12 nuclear devices, all timed to go off within seconds of each other. The combined radiation would create a dead zone 50 kilometers across. All teams extraction point Alpha, Park ordered. Move out. They ran through streets that tried to trap them. The swarm sent creatures that looked like nightmares to stop them. But human weapons and human determination cut through every obstacle. They reached their ship just as the countdown hit 0. The first explosion lit up the sky like a new sun. Then another, then 10 more in rapid succession. But it was not the explosions that mattered. It was what came after. The radiation spread through the swarm's quantum consciousness like poison. Where it touched, the collective intelligence broke. Down, ships went dark, creatures collapsed. The entire staging area began to die. Holy shit, whispered Sergeant Kim as she watched from the ship's viewport. It's working. The dead zone spread for hundreds of kilometers. Any swarm vessel that tried to enter it immediately lost contact with the collective mind. They became just organic matter, easy targets for human weapons. Word of the success spread through the human fleet. More strike teams prepared for more missions. Nuclear weapons that the galaxy considered obsolete became humanity's secret weapon. But the real victory came on the liberated worlds, where human tactics were changing everything. General Beak watched as alien refugees learned to fight alongside human soldiers. They were using kinetic weapons now, simple guns that fired metal bullets. They were digging trenches and building bunkers. They were learning the art of war that their species had forgotten. General, called Major Choi Sang-hoon, the Altarian refugees want to know if they can join our engineering corps. Beak smiled. The Altarians were a peaceful species that had not fought a war in 5,000 years. But they were good with their hands, and they were willing to learn. Tell them yes, we need all the help we can get. The tide was turning, void swarm advances were being stopped. Liberated worlds were staying free. The galaxy was learning that. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, but everyone knew the real fight was still to come. Somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the main body of the swarm was moving toward them. It was bigger than star systems, older than civilizations. And it was coming to finish what it had started. Captain Lee received the final intelligence report on his flagship. The numbers were staggering. The main swarm entity was the size of a small galaxy. It had consumed entire star clusters in other dimensions, and it would arrive in human space within days. Sir, his communications officer said quietly, Earth. Command is asking for your recommendations. Lee looked out at the stars, thinking of his homeworld and all the species now counting on humanity for salvation. Tell them to prepare every nuclear weapon we have, he said, and start building more. The thing that came from dark space was bigger than anything in the galaxy had imagined. It stretched across light years, a writhing mass of consumed civilizations and converted matter. As it moved between the stars, reality itself seemed to bend around it. This was the true form of the Void Swarm, not just a species, but a force of entropy made manifest. Fleet Admiral Kim Tae-young stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching long-range sensors track the approaching horror. He was a young man to hold such a high rank, but the war had aged him beyond his years. Gray touched his temples, and his eyes held the weight of impossible decisions. "Sir," reported Commander Lee Soo-bin from her position at the tactical station, "the entity is consuming dark matter as it moves. It's growing larger with every hour." Kim nodded. He had read Dr. Yu Sang-hwan's report. The main swarm consciousness existed partially in dark space, feeding on the invisible matter that made up most of the universe. No conventional weapon could touch it there, but there was one possibility. "Has Dr. Yu finished his calculations?" Kim asked. "Yes, sir." "He's ready to brief you." Dr. Yu Sang-hwan looked exhausted when he arrived on the bridge. He had been working for days without sleep, trying to solve an impossible equation. How do you kill something that exists in dimensions normal matter cannot reach? "Admiral," he said, his voice hoarse, "I believe we can disrupt the entity's quantum coherence, but only if we can generate specific radiation frequencies at the exact center of its dark matter matrix. Meaning? We have to fly into dark space itself, into the void between dimensions, and detonate a nuclear device that creates the exact isotopes needed to poison its consciousness." The bridge fell silent. Dark space was where light could not exist, where normal matter broke apart, where the laws of physics became suggestions. No ship in the galaxy was designed to survive there. "What kind of ship would we need?" Kim asked. "The simplest possible design. No energy systems the void can corrupt. No advanced materials it can convert. Just basic metals, chemical propulsion, and mechanical systems that will function in any environment." Kim understood. They would have to strip a ship down to bare essentials, remove everything that made it advanced. Turn a starship into something that could have been built centuries ago. How long would a crew survive in dark space? Dr. Yu looked away. Minutes, maybe an hour if they're lucky. The radiation alone would be lethal, and that's assuming the ship holds together. Admiral Kim walked to the viewport, looking out at the stars that would soon be consumed if they failed. Behind him he could hear the quiet conversations of his crew. They knew what he was thinking. "I'll need volunteers," he said finally. "Sir," Commander Lee Soo-bin stepped forward. "Permission to speak freely granted. We all volunteered when we joined the fleet. This is just ... more volunteering." Similar voices came from around the bridge. His navigator, his engineer, his communications officer, all of them willing to fly into hell itself for a galaxy that had called them primitive. But Kim shook his head. "This is a one-way trip. I won't ask others to die for my decisions." "With respect, Admiral," said Chief Petty Officer Nam Min-ho, "you're not asking, we're telling." The ship they chose was the Prometheus, an old exploration vessel that had been scheduled for scrap. Chief Engineer Park Hae-jin and her team stripped it down to the bones. They removed the quantum computers, the energy weapons, the matter converters. What remained was a metal shell with chemical rockets and basic life support. "It looks like something from a museum," observed Captain Jang Ki-tae as he inspected their work. "That's the point," Park replied. "Dark space can't corrupt what doesn't exist. This ship will run on the same principles as the first rockets humans built. Loading the nuclear device took special care. It was not designed to explode, but to burn in a specific way that would generate the radiation frequencies Dr. Yu had calculated. The isotopes it would create existed for microseconds in normal space, but in dark space they might last long enough to do their work. As the Prometheus prepared to launch, the galaxy held its breath. Every species that could still communicate sent messages of hope and gratitude. The council chambers on Nexus Prime were packed with representatives praying to gods whose names they could barely remember. Ambassador Kang Taemin stood among them, the only human in a room full of aliens who now looked to his species as saviors. They go into darkness so that light may remain, he said simply. The Prometheus launched with a crew of 50 volunteers. Admiral Kim commanded from the bridge that had been stripped to basic instruments. No holographic displays, no quantum sensors. Just radar, radio, and the kind of instruments that had guided human ships across Earth's oceans. Commander Lee Subin commanded the escort fleet that would take them as far as normal space allowed. Her ships carried refugees from the evacuation of 12 star systems. If the mission failed, they would be the last free beings in the galaxy. Prometheus, this is indomitable, she called over the radio as they approached the boundary of dark space. You are approaching the limit of our sensors. Copy, indomitable. We can see the boundary on our instruments. It looks like ... nothing. It did look like nothing. A wall of absolute darkness that seemed to absorb light itself. Stars simply ended at its edge, as if someone had drawn a line across reality. All stop, Kim ordered. Final systems check. His crew moved through the ship, checking everything by hand. No computer could be trusted in what they were about to face. Navigator Oh Dongmin used a sextant and paper charts. Engineer Park relied on mechanical gauges and her own experience. Communications Officer Yoon Ha-young tested her radio with voice calls. All systems green, she reported. We're as ready as we can be. Kim looked around at his crew. These people from the death world called Earth, they had families they would never see again, dreams they would never fulfill. But they were ready to die for species they had barely met. For the record, he said over the ship's intercom, it has been an honor serving with all of you. The honor is ours, sir. Came back 50 voices. The Prometheus crossed into dark space and immediately everything changed. The stars vanished. Light itself seemed to die. The ship's hull creaked and groaned as reality pressed in around them from dimensions that should not exist. Navigation report, Kim called. Dead reckoning only, sir. Compass bearing 270. Speed holding steady, but the instruments are acting strange. Strange was an understatement. In dark space, time moved differently. Distances bent and shifted. The crew could feel their bodies changing as radiation levels climbed beyond anything life was meant to endure. Sir, Engineer Park called from the engine room, the radiation is incredible. We've got maybe 30 minutes before critical system failure. Copy. How long to the target? 28 minutes if nothing goes wrong. Of course everything went wrong. The mechanical systems began failing as dark space pressed against them. The hull developed stress fractures that spread like spider webs. The air recycling system broke down, filling the ship with toxic fumes, but the crew kept working. When the instruments failed, they navigated by instinct. When the lights went out, they worked by touch. When the radio died, they shouted instructions. Down corridors, Navigator O found their target using a compass, a chronometer, and dead reckoning techniques that were older than spaceflight. Contact. Bearing 090, range approximately 2 kilometers. Through the viewports, they could see it, the heart of the void swarm entity. It pulsed with dark energy, a twisted sphere of consciousness that had consumed galaxies. It was beautiful and terrible, like looking at the birth of a universe or the death of everything. Weapons, arm the device, Kim ordered. The nuclear device was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was more like a key, designed to unlock specific quantum states that would poison the entity's consciousness. Dr. Yu had built it from materials found only on Earth, isotopes created by humanity's primitive nuclear technology. And device armed, reported Weapons Officer Kim Young-soo. We need to get within 100 meters for maximum effect. Admiral Kim took the controls himself. The Prometheus was dying around him, systems failing one by one. But she still had thrust, still had momentum. Like humanity itself, she was too stubborn to quit. All hands, brace for impact, he said. The ship slammed into the entity's surface and kept going, boring deep into its quantum structure. Around them, the void swarm consciousness raged and writhed, trying to understand what was happening. 10 seconds to detonation, Kim announced. The crew held each other as their ship broke apart around them. These people from Earth, who had traveled further from home than any human in history, who had saved a galaxy that barely knew their names. "It's been good knowing you all," Admiral Kim said. The nuclear device detonated in a flash of specific radiation frequencies. The isotopes it created lasted only microseconds, but in dark space they spread through the entity's quantum matrix like poison. Where they touched, consciousness died. The effect was immediate. The massive entity began to convulse and break apart. Its connection to our galaxy severed. Its influence over the consumed matter dissolved. Across known space, void swarm ships went dark and drifted lifeless. Commander Leah Subin watched from her bridge as the boundary of dark space suddenly collapsed inward. The wall of nothing folded in on itself.